Good evening. Welcome to the Combat Shillelagh Training Tips 11 through 20 webinar. We'll get started here in a second. We've got folks dialing in literally from all over the world, so give everybody an opportunity to get into the webinar. So just be patient and give us a second. All right, I see about 14 people and counting. Just bear with us. In the Q&A or the chat, if somebody wants to post, if the audio is okay, I'm assuming it is. That's why I'm wearing a headset, so I can speak properly and you can hear me. But somebody just wants to put a note in the Q&A, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, looks like I'm up to about 20 something and counting. Let's just give it another half a minute or so, and then we'll get kicked off and get started. So just bear with me. All right, got a couple more people trickling in. All right, sound is good. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. All right, so look, just to keep us on track, I appreciate everybody setting aside the time. This should be really good conversation, presentation material. So I wanted to go through a couple items. First off, welcome. Appreciate everybody coming in this evening and attending and having the conversation with me. My name is Brent Earlywine. I'm the founder of the Combat Shillelagh System. And tonight we are talking about the second set of training tips. I had already done and delivered a top 10 or training tips 1 through 10 as a webinar and repeated that a couple of times. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to participate in that. This is a continuation of that discussion. So not only am I sending out emails to all active students and prospects, training tip by training tip, but I wanted to collect them and deliver it in a live webinar format. So tonight's discussion is really around training tips 11 through 20. So it is a continuation. I want to say a couple of things from a housekeeping perspective. I have everybody's webcams and microphones turned off. Mostly that's just to guarantee that we've got enough bandwidth, so there's no issues with sharing the slides or my conversation from an audio perspective. I also have some videos we're going to play through the conversation this evening. I want to make sure that we maximize that bandwidth. So if you have any questions, comments, please post it in the Q&A section. I may not be able to answer it during the presentation tonight, but I will most certainly take a look at any and all questions and comments and then reply so everybody can see what those answers look like after the fact. And I'll provide that to everybody that registered and attended this evening. The other thing to keep in mind is this is being recorded, so you have the ability to come back and take a look at it later, download a copy of the video, so you can go back through if there's any material here that maybe you missed the first time through, or you just want to listen to it or see it again. You're certainly welcome to do so. I also want to say that this is not a public event. I only made this available to people that are active students, as well as folks that are prospects that are interested in becoming students. I did not make this publicly known on Facebook or Instagram or what have you from a webinar perspective. So really wanted to control who had access to it as a benefit, quite honestly. So if you're an active student, this is designed for you. If you're a prospect, then hopefully that gives you some additional excitement on really what this program is all about, how it works, how we train, what the concepts are, what have you. So with that, I'm going to get started. I do want to say a couple of things that I'm very excited to say that now that we are in or have students in 5 different countries and about 12 states in the United States and counting, which is awesome to me. Give you some background as the founder. I said this on the other webinar, but I'll just repeat some of it now. So I've been in training in martial arts full time for 35 years and counting. And that entire 3 decades plus, I've spent a ton of time on staff weapons, bladed weapons, what have you. So deep domain expertise on staff weapons applications, modern day combatives. Um, I have and run a full-time school here in Pittsburgh. I actually just celebrated 20 years this year of having a live full-time school. We run classes 3 days a week. We do seminars all the time, typically on about a quarterly basis, although some of those have been on pause recently due to what's been going on in the world. But definitely have that full-time school. Just welcome to all the students. Welcome to all the prospects. I spent about 4 years codifying all this information for the Combat Shillelagh. So a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of deep experience went into putting this all together. So hopefully it is something that if you're already training, you're enjoying it. If you're not training or you're considering it, welcome. Please take a serious look. I think you're going to have a blast. It's a lot of good stuff. Um, so what I want to do is, from an agenda perspective, training tips 11 through 20, each one of these can be really deep subject matters. So we'll spend some time on them tonight. We'll probably spend about an hour and some change on the entire webinar. But obviously these are things that you'll see not only in the material you have access to as students, but also these are things that would be explored in a pretty deep fashion in live classes, seminars, what have you. We certainly can't do every subject matter really good justice in the short amount of time that we have this evening. So highly encourage you to spend the time when you practice on your own, practice with your training partners, come see us live, or if you have us host in your backyard. This is the stuff that we would spend a lot of time on to make sure that you understand the really critical concepts for you to internalize, practice, and train with. So I'll start with striking, right? So, if you take a look at, any shillelagh fighting art, combat shillelagh, at first blush, it really looks like a striking art. And at its heart and its core, there's a lot of striking, blocking, that kind of work. And if you look at the way I have the curriculum structured and the way we deliver it to the students and what you're studying, level 1, level 2, level 3. So green belt, brown belt, black belt. At level 1, you're understanding each individual striking angle. I have them numbered, so the concept is based upon really one of our core ideas, which is the 9 gates, right? So you see those kind of numbered here, and again, that reinforces what we've discussed in previous sessions as well as in the training material. But what happens as you move from level 1 into level 2 into level 3, and then eventually into assistant instructor, instructor, and master levels, it really starts to get away from the idea that you're practicing something as, 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, or that idea of 1, 2, 3. And it's much more around combining these things together. So not only do you have all of the individual angles that are part of the 9 gates and the individual numbered strikes, so strike number 1, strike number 2, but the idea is starting to link those together. So at about a level 2 or end of level 1, into level 2 into level 3, you really should be practicing these as combinations. So this is one simple example that I have here where, down, number 1 strike can turn around, loop, and be a backwards upward strike from a number 6 angle or the number 6 strike. So it's a simple example of how do I put these two together, and or down on 1, loop it around, and back down on 2. Lots of ways to mix and match. So what I want to encourage you to do from a training perspective is that you're starting to combine these all together into one flow, is probably the best way to describe it. And then as you start to practice those flows, not only are you going to link together the angles, but you're also going to link together maybe individual types of strikes. So there are several strike types that are in our system. So if you just think of, backhanded strikes, feint strikes, kind of that helicopter around strike, overhand strike, flip strikes, right? All kinds of different ones that you'll see in the training material. So you're going to link the angles. You're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 of them together into one flow, and you're also going to start to mix and match between the strike types themselves. Because what happens is when you get into a real altercation or a real engagement with a live attacker, and you need to understand, how's this stuff kind of born in the moment or mixing and matching in the moment. Understanding each strike and each strike type individually is really a tool. And then eventually all those tools kind of go into your toolbox. You've got to memorize, you practice them a whole bunch. They start to become second nature. And then in the moment, you're able to really pull those tools out of your toolbox and then apply them as appropriate, whatever might be appropriate in the moment. So you don't have to think about it. It really becomes a reaction that's automatic. It's muscle memory. And then the linkage together is really what an altercation is going to look like. It's an altercation in real life is never just going to be one or two and then stop, or one and pause. It's really going to be a flurry of activity, both offense and defense. So let me just show you a quick video. If you have access to the training material, you might have seen this already. If you don't, this might be new to you, but let's just spend a minute or two, show you the video. I'll apologize up front. There is one particular moment at the beginning of the video where the camera auto focuses in and out. So just kind of skip that, ignore it, and give me the benefit of the doubt there, but let's just watch that real quick. All right, the next step I want to take is I want to make sure that you're doing combinations. So now I want you to do a bunch of drills connecting some of these types of strikes, the angles, the footwork, and really I'm looking for you to start to mix and match. Eventually, as this moves into kind of live testing and training, and the ability to apply it in the moment, you need to have the ability to mix and match and choose your tool in the appropriate moment. So if you think of doing combos, strikes, angles, I want you to move all the way around the 9 gates. I want you to mix and match low strikes, medium strikes, high strikes, reverse strikes, down the center line, up, thrusts. So you're starting to really put everything together. And then I also want you to focus on that live hand in the middle. So you have the ability to cover and control your own center line as we move into disarms takedowns. All right, so the other thing that you saw in that video was really also incorporating the footwork, and we'll have a whole slide here in a discussion on the footwork as well. But starting to do that mix and match, all the strikes, all the strike types, different angles, moving around the 9 gates. Although what you'll see in that video, the engagement distance was still pretty static, so I wasn't moving that far either forward or away from a potential opponent. We'll talk through that when we go through the footwork piece, but really encourage you to practice in that fashion as you advance through the system. The next step that I want to talk about is as you move into level 3, we have what we call stanzas. So these are really the person-on-person types of set movements. This is the body-on-body work. You'll also hear the term collar and elbow if you study or hear anything on history of Irish fighting arts or martial arts. And essentially what that is we're manipulating the structure of the opponent. So what's really fun and interesting about the shillelagh, this is where we get away from just a pure striking and blocking kind of art, and we advance, and we're a little different than other systems that you might see out there in terms that we incorporate this body on body type of work. So we're utilizing the bata or the stick as a really kind of a giant lever, and we're manipulating joints in directions they're not designed to go, right? So that kind of pain introduction to force the other person to move to a direction that we want them to move, or to stop an attack, defend against an attack, apply force, apply pain. And really what's underneath that's the core concept is really what I'm trying to do to the other person is I'm trying to break their structure. And I'm using the stick to do that. I can use the stick, hit him on a joint, cause pain in a striking fashion, which is okay. But sooner or later, I'm going to move into a closer person-on-person range, and I'm going to start to manipulate their body, either my body to their body, or bata to their body, or stick to their body, and really manipulate these joints. So you'll see a couple of concepts here that we care about. You'll see a grounding concept where I'm going to maybe take their stick or their bata and ground it to my center line to protect myself from them doing something in return, either strikes, hits, or manipulation that they might be trying to accomplish. Or in the meantime, in the stanzas, I'm actually going to to create very specific types of joint manipulation. So I'll show you that real quick. I have another video. Again, if you're a live student, you may have seen this material. If you're a prospect, this may be new to you, but it'll give you another example of what I'm talking about for the joint manipulation and the the grounding concept. So let me bring up that video. Okay, so now what we're going to do is introduce the idea of grounding, which is grounding the weapon or their attacking hand to our center line on our body. In our next level, in the assistant instructor level, we'll certainly expand on those concepts and ideas where we start to do a ton of understanding around disarms. But this is the foundation and the basics you need to understand to get to those levels, the idea of grounding. So if we start with the number one strike, I'm going to come to here and I want to bring it to my center line. And if we switch sides, you can see it. I'm inside that V, and I've created the V with my own ferrule end, and I want to bring it down to my waistline. This starts to break his structure, and I have the ability to do some of the manipulations that we've already started to explore here in level 2. So I'll pause it here for one quick second. So this is a great example of what I was talking about in terms of breaking their structure. So if you take a look at my training partner here, one of my instructors, essentially what I've done is I've really kind of leaned him over, right? So I've taken his balance in a forward fashion. I've attached him to my center line and my hip, if you will, from that grounding action. So he's really kind of stuck. I actually have that pretty firmly against the front of my hip. And then if you look at my structure or my spinal alignment, I'm still in an upright fashion. I still have full balance. I'm evenly distributed on my weight between my feet. And if you look at his feet in return, probably 2/3 of his weight is on that forward leg and forward foot, which means that he's really kind of stuck. So it's really difficult for him to pick up that front foot and place it and move it and get it somewhere else. He almost has to do two movements to get out of that place where he's stuck. So that's part of what I'm talking about in taking their structure or ruining their structure or breaking their structure while maintaining your own. So you'll see this example show up as a concept in all the stanzas in level 2, level 3 of our system. But it's really important to call this out, that that's really the core concept that's underneath it. So the stanzas are nothing more, again, than a starting point for you to understand and apply as an example of what it could look like. And then again, of course, it's the tool, you put it in the toolbox, and then eventually in, live altercations, live training, kind of that back and forth, it can be born in the moment, and you start to figure out how to manipulate their joints with the stick, the staff, or your own body, right? So the elbows, the shoulders, the wrists, the knees, the hip, the spine, right? Those are all joints that we might manipulate, move to break their structure. All right, let me go back to the slides. The rest of this video is essentially, excuse me, more of the same from a grounding perspective. All right, so one of the critical things, well, I'm saying a lot of things are critical. I guess these are really important points, why I'm calling them out and highlighting them for you. But the movement of your feet. So if you ever go out and look and compare, videos on YouTube on all different kinds of martial arts, to boxing, to you name it, one of the things I always want you to look for is, what do they do with their feet? A lot of times what you'll see is some martial arts may be very static in how they move their feet. They're kind of planted in place, and they're really just moving their upper body, or they're punching or hitting with a weapon or what have you. And it's a flaw because the movement of your feet really creates an awful lot of magic for you. And here's what I mean by that. So again, at a base level for us, we have the 9 gates drawn on the floor, right? So if you have a training area, take some black tape and draw that star, if you will, on the floor. And then you can have the middle line be that engagement line. That's that line that goes left to right here in the middle of the star. And then a lot of times when we started, we talked about getting off the X, which is stepping back left, stepping back right. That's off the X, right? So the attack line is kind of right through the middle on the vertical axis. The engagement line is the horizontal axis, and then you're stepping back. Really, it's a simple concept, but a big one. And then eventually what you need to do is you're moving all around those 9 angles. If you'll notice on the footprints here on this particular map or chart, it's again really static. So it's really moving to those different levels, right? So back left, back right, straight back, or maybe I'm going to go sideways left, sideways right. Or what's interesting, you can start to go forward on that X as well. So forward left, forward right, or just straight forward. But ultimately, at the higher levels, we start to add some rotations, and then we start to alter the distance between us and the opponent. So not only are we moving to a particular angle, back left, back right, but we also alter the amount of space between us and the opponent as we start to do some dynamic footwork instead of a static footwork. So what that means is you're really altering the engagement distance between you and the opponent, either closer, shorter, or further away, and you're changing the angle at the exact same time. One of the cautions I give to everybody, especially see it at early levels, is people want to try to tank it. And the idea is, tanking, I'm just going to stand there and take it. I'm just going to, try to block all the incoming attacks, but I'm not going to move my feet. So you have to move your feet. So when you're in doubt, you're not sure what to do, how to be safe, worst case, move your feet. Go back, go sideways, go forwards, rotate, move around, change that engagement distance. Really, really important. So not just static, but dynamic as you go. So let me do 1 or 2 video choices here as well, just to show you some of the examples of what I was talking about.
All right, in level 3, we're going to start to do some advanced footwork. So we talked about going all around the 9 gates, the 9 angles, with stepping forward, back, off the X. One of the other advanced footworks is a idea of these cross steps. So normally when we're getting off the X, we're just taking a simple step in any one of the 9 angles. But now we're going to do a cross step. We can either do it as a subtle step or even with a little bit of extra energy, if you will, and I get offline of the attack. So let's take a look and see what that's like.
So here, for example, I talk about a cross step. So not only am I kind of moving off the X back right, but I'm also starting to create a rotation that sooner or later I can add a response and a strike in return. And it puts me in a really good spot to respond to that attack. So he's just simply doing that number 1 strike, downright overhand. Most common attack you're going to see either in punching in human nature or humans or with a weapon in their hand. That is the single most common type of attack you're going to experience. So I'm moving offline. I'm starting to create a rotation point, and I'm creating some distance. So let me go to another example real quick. Footwork 2, there we go. This was at a live event, still doing some cross steps, but a little more space. You can see maybe a little more dynamic.
Step out, I'm lifting this up and then looping around for this shot. So we're going to do, nope. Now I'm going to move this way. Okay. Here. Or I'm going to step forward and give a shot. So, here. So coming around and get to here. Okay? So I'm not blocking it.
So in that instance, the reason why I wanted to call that out, and again, it's in the training material, but I wanted to call out specifically, that's an example where I moved forward on that X, right? So forward left in that particular instance. And with the cross step, I was starting to set up a potential rotation. So I got offline, but I didn't get offline by retreating. I got offline by actually moving forward. And then I also set up, kind of step number 2, number 3 in terms of rotation, and then being able to hit him really from an unseen or unprotected protected angle, which was either from the side or almost from the side back. So the footwork can be really, really powerful. So important for you to, again, practice all those angles, practice the distance, make it a little more dynamic. Don't just make it static. You got to practice the static stuff first before you can move the dynamic. Otherwise, it won't make any sense. But make sure that you're continuing to progress in how you manipulate your footwork. All right. The last thing I'd call out here is as we move into assistant instructor, instructor, and master levels, we actually have longer range weapons, bladed weapons, and then empty hands. So that creates, 3 very distinct engagement distances. If it's empty hands, it's really close, in person, body on body. If it's with blades, if they're short blades like a dirk, they're going to be similar to an engagement distance of the shillelagh or the cudgel. And if it's a longer range weapon, we actually will study all the way up to a 6-foot staff. That engagement distance becomes very, very different, right? So now you're, instead of 3 feet away, you're 6 feet away plus. So manipulating that distance becomes very interesting and very powerful as you figure out how to manipulate and utilize and apply longer range weapons as well as shorter range weapons. All right, so I got a whole bunch of really positive responses on the how to make a striking post. So I thought I'd spend just a few seconds here on really what this was all about. So look, as you train, you got to set up some training space, whether it's in your garage, it's in your basement, whether it's a training group and you have dedicated space, you have a full-blown training hall, whatever the case might be. Not only should you be practicing person on person with safety gear or safety versions of the training shillelagh or the training bata, but you also probably should have a training item to strike, which is a striking post. So you don't need to spend a ton of money or a ton of time on it. This is really simple and straightforward. Go to your local, building supply store, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever it might be in your country or your state. This was just a 4x4 post in the ground. Since I did this outside, there's actually a kind of a 4x4 metal stake that you can drive into the ground and then put the post inside of it. It was an easy way to do this without trying to sink it into concrete. If you have an indoor training space, you might be able to bolt this to a wall or hang it from a ceiling, or lots of ways to get creative on how to do that. But then attached to the 4x4 post, I really just took some old tires, cut them into chunks, and then screwed them to the 4x4 post with some screws and washers to hold them. You might need some tools to cut the tires. I had steel belted tires that I utilized, so I had to use some wire cutters to get all the way through the tires with the metal steel belts inside of them, but it actually wasn't that difficult. And then the placement is really to mimic where you might be striking on another human being, right? So I had the big tire for the head, temple areas. I had a couple of tire chunks that were really going to mimic, kind of the midsection, the ribs, the floating ribs, the sternum. And then I had something that was going to mimic around the knees. So if you think through, our striking target charts that we have in the student manual or in the videos, you can see how you could place these so it mimics where you're normally going to need to practice strikes as well. I actually took mine. I got to add some photos, but I added a crossbar across the back to mimic holding something in arms. Right. So you could, if you wanted to get crazy, get creative, you could add some additional stuff to, your striking dummy, put some 2x4s on it, maybe even, duct tape a stick and practice that way. So it's a great way to do some solo training, but it's also a great way to just beat the crap out of something, have some fun, but do it with purpose, and then do it with some real practice, with some real targeting, the strikes, the strike types, the strike angles. Move your feet while you're doing it. It's just a lot of fun to do this. So I have some video of me practicing with the striking post. I'll post that into the groups. I'll post that on Instagram so you guys can see it, and I'll share it, just to give you some ideas on what that might look like. All right. Another big concept I want to talk about is the idea of broken rhythm, right? So I've touched on some of these concepts, right? So as you're practicing strikes, Typically what I'll see is people will default to a very consistent rhythm, right? So they're going to do strikes and strike types, but they're going to do kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So a very consistent cadence or tempo. And really what's powerful is as you get into live training person on person, and God forbid you ever end up in any sort of altercation, the concept of broken rhythm or broken tempo can be really, really amazing, right? So there's some processing on how the brain works, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But effectively, what you're going to end up doing is you start to introduce a pause in between strikes. So longer pauses, shorter pauses. So it might be, strike number 1, pause, 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 strike number 2, 3, 4, pause, strike 5, pause, 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 strike 6, right? So you start to mix and match the actual pausing or space or the tempo in between the attacks that you're delivering. What that does is it makes it very difficult for the other person to kind of process and keep up with. So I would encourage you to take a look at how to, kind of break it up. So again, when you start, it's okay to have a consistent rhythm. It's okay to have a consistent tempo. But as you get comfortable with the basic strikes, the strike types, you can start to mix and match not only the angles and the types, but also the tempo and the rhythm of the striking. So it's a good thing to practice on the striking post or the striking dummy, and or against a training partner, so you can see what I'm talking about. But really think about breaking up that rhythm, extend it at certain points, really shorten it, and or put a whole bunch together all in a row. It's very, very difficult for the other person to really kind of keep up and see what the heck is going on, and or come up with some sort of response to it. So please take a look at that, explore it, have some fun. You guys, if you want to, send me videos of your training, email it to me, put it on the Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger. I don't care. I'd love to see that, not from a testing purpose, but just to see how you're progressing in your own training. There's some really good examples here. All right, so the OODA loop. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this concept. So it actually was created by a fighter pilot to try to understand and explain what's known as human reaction time. So the OODA loop, it's an acronym. It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And any human being on the planet, if they're going to react to and deal with a stimulus of any kind, whatever it might be, is going to have to go through this process. This is how the brain actually works, how it absorbs information, interprets information, makes a decision on what to do about it, and then actually some sort of action, right? So anything you might do, from driving your car to response to a loud noise, or to, you name it, anything that's a stimulus that's coming in through your senses, your brain is going to go through this. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to observe something has happened, right? So you saw something, you heard something, you felt something. Your brain is essentially going, hey, hold up, something has happened here. One of my senses has triggered my attention. I need to observe what the heck it is, right? And then I'm going to orient on whatever that stimulus might be. And the orientation phase is really about trying to interpret what it is. So, what is that loud noise? Is it threatening? Is it non-threatening? And then effectively, I'm going to move to kind of the conscious piece of my brain, which is making a decision on what the heck do I do about it. And then once I've made a decision on what I'm going to do about it, I'm going to act, right? So I'm going to trigger muscles, or, something of a body movement, or, whatever, to actually do an act of some kind in response to that stimulus. That entire process, on average, takes about 250 milliseconds. There are some ways to short circuit it, but not by much. Usually it's through operant conditioning, where, one of the things that I do in live seminars, we talk about utilizing the flinch reaction to automatically condition a specific response from a protection and cover. So you'll see us do this kind of, hands up kind of thing in response to a stimulus. We don't know if it's threatening or not, but we just default there. That way I don't have to have the stimulus, figure out what it is, make a decision, and then bring my hands up to protect myself. It takes too much time, so I can short circuit it. But in general, you're really kind of stuck with 250 milliseconds in the human reaction time to get from stimulus all the way to an action to do something about it. There's good news and bad news there. The good news is you can use that to your advantage. You'll hear the term that action is always faster than reaction. This is why, right? So if you're acting, so if you're attacking or striking, they have to go through this loop to get to some sort of reaction. So you get there first. They take another 250 milliseconds to do something about it. Therefore, you're ahead of the curve. The other thing that's interesting, good news and bad news, is that you can interrupt, this loop with another action and another stimulus, right? So what happens there is effectively the clock resets. So if you do one strike, they're trying to respond to it, react, and you move to a second strike or a third strike. Effectively, you're resetting their OODA loop and you're resetting their time to process. And eventually, you get to a point where you're ahead of the curve so much that you're really dictating their actions, their motions, and what they can do because you keep resetting the clock on them. When we talk about the feint strikes, where we feint, right, we may go low and then actually strike high, right? So the person thinks you're going to hit him in the knee, but you've actually moved to striking them in the temple while they're still reacting to a strike at their knee level. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. Um, the bad news is this can be used against you as well, right? Because you're human, you have the same human reaction time. You may find yourself, kind of behind the curve as well. But I encourage you to spend some time and really practice the feint strikes. And it's not so much one strike then two strikes. It's much more try to sell the concept. I'm going to strike you here, but then I move to the actual target area that I wanted to hit all along. You just, as the opponent, don't know that because you think I'm going to strike at a particular target, but I've moved and hit a secondary target. That was my goal all along. And when you do that, then effectively he never really catches up, right? He's always behind the eight ball, trying to figure out what the hell to do about the incoming attacks, and then you end up as the victor in that altercation. The other way to practice this is by stringing a whole bunch of attacks or combinations together, which is why I started with practicing actual strike combinations. So if you, instead of just doing one strike, two strikes, and then pause, it could be this flurry of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So it's you're stringing them all together, and while he's still trying to process strike number one, maybe strike number two, you've already hit him the fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. You'll find that to be very, very true as you practice it. Have somebody do it to you, right? Somebody do a flurry of strikes, and you'll find yourself behind that eight ball pretty quick, and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So the OODA loop is a really deep kind of human physiology concept and subject matter to dive into. If you're not familiar with it, a couple of really great books out there that you can take a look at. This is also usually directly tied to discussions around awareness levels. So if anybody knows Jeff Cooper's color-coded awareness levels from a combatives perspective, that's also another really good discussion. I don't have a slide on it here, but it's certainly stuff that we talk about in live seminars and live classes all the time, and that's really around that awareness level, which is the observation and orient piece of the OODA loop. So any questions on that, you guys can post in the Q&A, send me an email, reach out to me live. More than happy to have that discussion with you. All right. I get a lot of questions around power generation. So if you think of hitting somebody with the bata, again, there's probably common mistakes that I see all the time at early levels, and one of them is only utilizing the upper body for the delivery of the strikes and the generation of that power. So using arm strength, upper body strength, shoulder strength to generate and deliver power. And honestly, power is generated by the movement of the feet. It's also generated by proper structure. So we talked about spinal alignment quickly in one of the earlier slides. But if you have proper spinal alignment, proper balance, and you actually deliver the strike with your feet and not just with your arm, then you will generate literally, 10 times more power. So one of the best ways to practice this is when I'm going to practice individual strikes, I want to make sure that I'm linking together my footwork and foot movement with my actual physical strike with my hand and arm, right? So if I'm going to strike, let's say the number one down overhead strike, I don't want to leave my feet in place and only use my upper body to deliver that strike. I actually want to deliver it with my foot movement, moving offline, forward, sideways, left, right, doesn't matter, but I'm delivering it with the footwork, so it's linked together. I also want to make sure that the timing is exactly the same. So effectively, the foot will land the same time the strike lands. So I don't want to strike and then move my foot, nor do I want to move my foot then strike. That's what I mean by linkage. I want to make sure that everything is moving in motion, in concert at the same time. And when you do that, you'll find that you really aren't moving your arm very much at all. You're using your entire body weight, your entire structure to deliver and generate that power. Very, very effective. So when you look at other martial arts, you look at boxing, for example. When you see people that really know how to hit, you'll see that that linkage between the footwork and the actual striking versus somebody just kind of standing there or in a static position and only using their upper arms. That's not to say that using your arm by itself can't still be effective. There's just ways to be more effective in delivering that power. It's also less tiring if you use your feet and use your entire body. If you just sit there and, kind of do this with your upper arms, upper body, you're going to burn out really quickly. You run out of oxygen, burn that up in your muscles and, effectively maybe end up in a really bad place where you can't keep up. But if you do it with your feet and your entire body, you're going to end up in a much better spot. The other thing that's referenced here is what's known as the drop step. So if you've ever trained in other arts or maybe in other striking arts, that delivery of the drop step is really just the body weight being behind that strike, and it's a way to figure out how to do that delivery and do the linkage with the body and the feet. All right, so let's go to. Couple of things here. It's so I got two photos at the bottom. In the student manual, I have required reading. So you've got to consider this art as a combatives art, right? So we spend a lot of time on understanding the bata, the shillelagh, striking, blocking, using it as a lever on the body parts and joint manipulation. But effectively, there's also a really deep need to understand the whole idea of violence. Where does it happen? Why does it happen? Who perpetrates it? Why is somebody attacking me, right? Whatever that case may be. So, we get into some good discussions on kind of modern day combatives, modern day self-defense, and not only from a physical aspect, but how do I mitigate it up front? So the best fight is one that I'm never in. So how do I eliminate and mitigate my risks of never being in an altercation to begin with? I want to have the skills to protect myself and my loved ones when I do. And then there's a aftermath piece as well from a legal perspective. So unfortunately, we live in a very litigious society where somebody's going to sue you at the drop of a hat. So there's really kind of that entire life cycle of violence to understand. So at the top right on the slide, I've got John Hurley's books. This is great from a historical perspective. Understand the development of Irish martial arts, specific to stick fighting, faction fights. The history and make of the shillelagh, how they do it, where it comes from, and then just the development over the ages on what the Irish martial arts really look like. So if you don't have those in your library, you got to have them, right? That's a base. If you're going to practice an art that's got roots and cores from Ireland, then you really need to understand where it comes from. The rest of what you see here is really around more modern day understanding of violence. So a couple of things here, big subject matters. Gift of Fear from Gavin Becker, great understanding on kind of mitigating your risk. Left of Bang is the combat hunter program that was developed for the Marine Corps in Afghanistan. I actually have certifications in that program. Really, really good. And then across the bottom, there are two well-known thought leaders. If you look at anything to do with modern day understanding of violence and anything to do with it, again, how does it happen? Where does it happen? Why does it happen? Aftermath, who perpetrates it? The two gentlemen are Rory Miller. That's the gentleman on the left in the photo with me. His books definitely required reading. The Conflict Communications is the one that he's most famous for. All the other ones here have been ones he's released over the last decade and a half. So highly, highly recommend that you pick up his books. You can buy them on Amazon. Well worth your time to read and go through. The second gentleman that you see is Mark McYoung. Mark McYoung is also a well-known violence professional. Mark used to be on the other side of the law, so he used to be a criminal and living on the streets and doing things that criminals do. So he comes to it from a realistic street level perspective. His stuff is also really good, but it's very different perspective to read and understand. Mark has cleaned up his life, and over the last 3 decades now, he's effectively an expert witness in self-defense cases. Gets hired all the time. He does lectures. He does seminars. I've had a golden opportunity to train with both of these gentlemen, and just amazing experiences, amazing information. If you don't follow them or don't know of them, go take a look at them on Facebook. Mark's got an awesome website called No Nonsense Self-Defense. Very deep subject matters, articles on anything and everything to do with self-defense and violence. So highly recommend that you guys go check them out. From my perspective, for my students and for prospects, these are the books that you should have in your library. There's a ton more. If you look over my shoulder, you see one of my bookshelves filled with material and books that I've read and researched and trained with over the decades. But this is an awesome starting point that you can't go wrong. So please take a look, order the books, get your reading list started, and enjoy your reads. All right. I want to move to kind of a transition discussion between the striking and the body-on-body stanzas that I referenced earlier. So we talked about joint manipulation. We talked about grounding. Some of the other concepts that you'll see at the level 3 and beyond is trapping, jailing, applying the grounding, the V-trapping. This is all where we're utilizing the bata and body parts to really manipulate that body person on person. This is closer to the collar and elbow type of joint manipulation, the throws, the takedowns, the joint locks, and then also this is opening up the gateway towards disarming or stripping the other person of their weapon with the V trapping. So what I'll do is I'll show you another quick video. You may have seen it if you're a student. If you are a prospect, you probably haven't. But let's take a quick look at the trapping manipulation.
I want and hit. I'm inside that arc. If I go to the outside, we'll switch sides. Get the idea, right? Pass, trap, and then we can move to some sort of hit or hands off. Yeah? Switch sides. Well, here, trap, and then you can hit. Okay?
All right, so simple example of a couple of concepts there, right? So I was getting offline. I was using the 9 gates footwork to get off of the attack. I actually either moved forward or off to the left or off to the right, whether it's inside or outside of the incoming attack. You saw that when I slipped the attack, I actually grounded it, so it was in a safe spot. So I talked about taking it to my center line, and then I responded somehow either with a strike and return, or I started to open up the concept of maybe using the last third of the bata or the shillelagh in a V fashion, which is that V between my forearm, wrist, and the end of the stick, right? On how I could use that to do some trapping on body parts, and those body parts could be anything. Those body parts could be the wrist, the elbow, the neck, the stick itself. You name it. And the photo here in the slide, you see that example where the gentleman has that V of the end of the stick and his forearm around the other person's forearm to trap it, jail it, and hold it. You also start to see the applications in this photo of breaking the other person's structure. So the gentleman that's getting his rear end handed to him here in this photo, his spine is bent over. He's bent over backwards. We talked about this. His balance is towards the back. He's in a really kind of, bad spot from a body positioning perspective. The person that's applying the techniques, his spine is straight. He's upright. His balance is pretty even. And all the while, he started to cover and control any of the potential threats, right? So with the shillelagh in his right hand, he's got the V trapping to control the weapon arm on the person that he's defending against. And then if you'll notice on his left hand, he actually has got cover and control of the the person's other hand and wrist to control and protect against, a strike, a stab, a punch, what have you. And oh, by the way, he's also got the back of his elbow up underneath the gentleman's chin to break his structure, control his balance, bend him over backwards a little bit before he might hit him. Joint manipulation or drop him to the ground or throw him or what have you. So a lot of stuff all starting to come together for an example here with the B-trapping, the grounding, trapping or jailing different body parts. So this is really kind of opening the gates to the next steps in the evolution. So level 3 actually ends up being a transition from the striking arts to manipulation arts and more sophisticated ways to engage the entire person as a offense or defense as you move into assistant instructor, and master levels, right? So we start to apply all of these concepts in motion in the moment. So really, really important again to play and understand what this looks like. You'll see it live. It's in the training material. You'll see it in seminars. So those concepts are all buried. I'm just really kind of teasing out what I want you to pay attention to as you review any of that material as you go through it. All right, so kind of the last big piece here is running a training group. So look, I've had an awful lot of people have reached out to me, whether they're existing martial artists or they just have a goal that they want to actually create or start a training group or eventually put themselves on instructor track to become full-blown instructors all the way up to and including master level inside the system. So I just want to run through, kind of expectations and framework on what it might be. So first off, the art is going to require a training partner at some point, right? So level 1, part of level 2, you can kind of do on your own and, get a lot of value out of and do some great training. All along the way, you'll still do solo training, but sooner or later, you really need another person to train with or multiple people to train with. So as you start to put together a training group, whether you want to be a leader or not be a leader, there's some concepts there. So we talked about, the last webinar on training tips 1 through 10 is setting up a training area, make sure it's safe for you and for others. And then you'll see the drills and the training really require, live attacks from somebody else or you attacking them so they can understand what the defense looks like. So you got to see both sides of that coin. You got to understand the attack side of the coin. You got to understand the defending part of the coin. As you move into level 3 and beyond, and we start to do this person on person, you really need another body, another person to figure out what these manipulations look like and understand how to apply it and apply it in the moment so you can start to mix and match striking and trapping and jailing and joint locks and manipulations and throws and all the stuff we've been talking about. It really won't come alive for you without that person. So the idea is sooner or later you may be interested to not just have a training partner, but you may actually want to lead a group. So before you become an instructor, you're really not teaching, but you may be leading without teaching. So the idea is, you're coordinating maybe a set schedule. You guys are going to get together, every Monday at 7 o'clock or, Saturdays at 11 a.m. or whatever the case might be. You may agree on where that training space might be, your garage, your basement, at the church, at the local park, or you may even go so far as to actually have dedicated space. I've got people that actually have existing training halls, existing dojos where they study other stuff. They've added this to their curriculum or added this to their own studies. So you may have dedicated space, dedicated schedule. You can certainly do anything you want in terms of what that schedule and space might look like. I'm just giving you some suggestions and guidance. But if you want to move down that path, I am interested in additional instructors. I have several instructors here in Pittsburgh that have been with me for years and years. That were either newer instructors in the system after I launched it, or were instructor level or senior students with me from past experience that were really interested in going on this path as well, and they've done that. So there is an invite for other people to do the exact same thing. I'd love to see some additional instructors. So I've got somebody in Russia that wants to be an instructor. I've got somebody out in Washington State that wants to be an instructor. I have somebody in New Jersey that wants to be an instructor. I've got several more that are in conversation to do the exact same thing. So I'd be more than happy to support you putting together bigger training group and put yourself on that training path to become instructor. Still got to go through all the levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, get you up to first degree black belt. Then there's an assistant instructor level, then there's a full-blown instructor level, then there's a master level. So there's 3 more above what you may have already seen so far. And really what I'm after there, if you're going to put together a training group, is I want somebody to be kind of the responsible liaison. So you're the person that's helping coordinate the training with everybody else. You're making sure everybody's got current memberships. Maybe you're scheduling the not only the training and the classes, or at least training times and locations, but also maybe helping coordinate, making sure everybody stays on track from a testing perspective. So there's some consistency to it. And then, sooner or later, if somebody wants to be a full-blown instructor, then I have a arrangement that we can set up from kind of a wholesale idea, right? So, somebody doesn't necessarily have to come directly to me. They can actually flow through you as a certified instructor. And then that is everything from access to materials to, paying you to actually teach if you're a certified instructor, to how we flow rank and recognition, memberships, what have you, all the way through. So this is a model that I've been used to in 3.5 decades in my existing studies and past studies. So as people advance through the ranks, this is certainly a model that's available to everybody else here. So if you're interested in that, please send me an email, give me a phone call. We can talk through it. Again, I've had these conversations with several people that are starting to put themselves on that path, and they're definitely interested. So it is an option that is open to all the above and anybody that might be interested. All right, so that is most of the material that I wanted to go through tonight. So we'll get us really close to that 1 hour time frame. So we stayed on target. I really just want to say a couple of things in closing. First off, really glad everybody is here. I hope everybody's having a blast. Anybody that's reached out to me, hopefully the response times have been really good. My main goal is to help you as much as I can in your training. Make sure that you've got access to what you need, you've got support, your questions are answered. And then I'm also really interested in seeing how you progress. Send me photos, send me videos. And then, of course, that's separate from your ranking options that we talked about on the last webinar. But I really just want to see how you're doing, right? So I can give you some feedback, or one of my senior instructors can give you feedback. But it's really designed to be helping you grow, get through the system, get to the higher levels in the program, and really just be a better version of yourself than you are today, right? So it's all about growth, and it's something that's near and dear in my heart from a martial arts perspective. People helped me along the way. This is my opportunity to give back to you as well. So hopefully you guys thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. The recording will be available for anybody that registered and attended, so you can listen to it again, download it, take a look at it. So we have now had an opportunity to go through the top 20 training tips, 1 through 10 in the last webinar, 11 through 20 on this webinar. There'll be additional feedback, additional training tips, but really just wanted to spend the time to offer this to you. So hopefully you found value in it. Hope you had a good evening and a good session, and we will talk to you soon. Any questions, comments, feedback, again, put it in the Q&A, send me an email, reach out, call me, post it on Instagram. I'm available on all those channels and all those vehicles, so I'd be more than happy to hear from everybody. All right, folks, so have a great night, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.